On a quiet street in suburban Colorado, a single mother named Grace Callahan put her two children to bed on what seemed like any other Tuesday night. She had no idea that within the hour, a stranger would break into her home armed, dangerous, and ready to leave no witnesses. But Grace wasn't just any victim. What followed in the next 47 minutes would be studied by police, praised by self-defense experts, and shared in viral headlines across the world, because what the robber didn't expect was that the woman alone inside that house had been preparing for this moment her entire life. Part 1, Ordinary Life, Extraordinary Woman Grace Callahan, 34, was a nurse by profession and a mother by heart. Widowed 3 years earlier in a car accident that claimed her husband's life, she had since raised her two kids, Ava, 8, and Liam, 5, on her own. By day, she worked long shifts at Denver General Hospital. By night, she took kickboxing classes. It wasn't for vanity. It was therapy. It was also preparation because Grace had seen what violence could do. She believed in always being ready. Her father, a retired sheriff, had taught her how to shoot. Her brother, a Marine, had taught her how to assess threats. And her late husband had once insisted on installing a full security system and reinforced door locks. Grace took nothing for granted. Part 2, A Knock at Midnight. It was 11:47 p.m. when the glass shattered. The alarm system failed to sound. A window in a laundry room, old and forgotten, was the weak point. She heard the thud, then silence. Then the creak of footsteps. Grace didn't scream. She didn't panic. She moved. Quietly reaching for the small safe tucked beneath her kitchen sink, she retrieved her Glock 19 registered, loaded, trained with. She checked on her kids, still asleep. She locked their bedroom door, and then, barefoot and breathing slow, she moved into the hallway. Part 3, The Robber He Had Done This Before. 4 other homes in the past 6 months. His name was Tyler Maddox, a 29-year-old with a rap sheet and a reputation for slipping in and out without a trace. No one ever saw him coming. No one ever fought back. Until tonight. He moved through Grace's home like a shadow. Black hoodie, gloves, a crowbar in his hand, and a knife in his boot. He wasn't expecting resistance, but then he turned a corner and saw her. Part 4, the first confrontation. Grace didn't wait for him to speak. She shouted with command, "Put it down. Don't move." He froze. For a split second, then he lunged. She fired. The shot missed by inches, deliberately, a warning. He stopped, then ran, toward the stairs, toward her children's room. Part 5, the battle upstairs. Grace pursued, calculated, not reckless. At the top of the stairs, he tried to shove a chair down at her. She ducked, fired again, this time grazing his leg. He screamed and kicked open the kid's door. But Grace was faster. She tackled him from behind. The gun flew from her hand. They wrestled. He slammed her into the wall. She elbowed him in the throat. He pulled the knife. She kicked him in the knee. Disarmed him with one motion she'd practiced 1,000 times. He ran. Part 6, the capture. Bleeding and limping, Tyler made it to the backyard. Grace followed, grabbed her phone, called 911 while keeping her distance. When police arrived, he was trying to climb a fence. He didn't make it. They arrested him on the spot. Part 7, the aftermath. Grace was treated for bruises. Her children never saw the fight. The story made news across Colorado, then national headlines. People hailed her as a hero. She didn't want the attention. She only wanted others to know, strength isn't about size or gender. It's about mindset. Tyler Maddox was sentenced to 22 years in prison. Grace became an advocate for self-defense education. She started a program called Not Today for single mothers. Part 8, Echoes of Courage. In the days following the home invasion, Grace found herself unable to sleep. Even though her children were safe, the adrenaline never seemed to wear off. Every creak in the house sent her heart racing. But instead of succumbing to fear, she poured herself into advocacy. She began speaking at local community centers, sharing her story not to glorify the violence, but to prepare others. Her talks focused on awareness, preparation, and emotional resilience. Mothers, students, elderly residents all showed up in droves to learn from her. Word spread. A local news station aired a full feature. Donations came in. Her self-defense program, Not Today, grew from a local initiative to a state-funded pilot program. She partnered with law enforcement to train women in basic defensive tactics and situational awareness. But Grace knew the fight wasn't over. Somewhere out there were others like Tyler Maddox, and others like her, unprepared, vulnerable. She was going to change that. Part 9. Rising Voices. Grace's program began drawing attention from national women's organizations. She received invitations to speak at safety expos, college campuses, and even a televised panel discussion on women's rights and personal protection. Through the Not Today initiative, survivors from across the country started sharing their own stories, some too painful to speak of before. Grace launched a digital series called Prepared, Not Paranoid, featuring interviews with trauma therapists, martial arts trainers, and real-life survivors of violent encounters. A publishing company approached her for a memoir. She turned it down. "This isn't just my story," she said. "It's every woman's story." Instead, she hired a small team to expand her mission nationally. The new goal: equip 100,000 women with the skills to defend themselves by the end of the year. She meant it. Part 10. A knock from the past months passed, and Grace's program flourished. The stories continued to pour in: mothers who prevented carjackings, college students who de-escalated threats, elderly women who escaped scams. Each one fueled Grace's mission. One fall afternoon, while reviewing training footage in her small office above a women's shelter in Aurora, she received an unexpected visitor. It was Detective Marla Hensley, the same officer who had first taken her statement the night of the invasion. But she wasn't alone. Behind her stood a young woman in her early 20s, pale and trembling. "She says she was there that night," Hensley said quietly. "In the car with Maddox." Grace's breath caught. The girl, barely more than a teenager at the time, had escaped Maddox's abuse years ago. But guilt had eaten at her since. Now she wanted to help. She had names, locations, a list of other crimes Maddox was involved in. The girl wasn't just a witness, she was a key to unraveling a wider ring of burglaries and violent acts. Grace invited her in, and with that, her fight for justice took on an even deeper purpose. Part 11. Chains Unbroken. The young woman's name was Emily Ruiz, and for 5 years she had lived under a false identity in Kansas, afraid that Maddox's people would find her. But after seeing Grace's televised panel about victims turning into advocates, she found the courage to come forward. Emily detailed how Maddox had been part of a larger network of thieves and predators, a loosely connected ring that operated across 3 states, targeting women who lived alone, mostly single mothers and elderly victims. Her information was specific: stolen goods drop points, burner phone numbers, coded online ads for fencing stolen merchandise. It was more than law enforcement had ever managed to uncover. Detective Hensley connected Emily with the FBI, but they needed someone to bridge the gap between survivors and authorities. That person was Grace. For the first time, her advocacy stepped into the realm of criminal justice. She agreed to become a liaison for a joint task force focused on dismantling this ring and protecting other potential victims. The fight wasn't over. Grace had just stepped onto a bigger battlefield. Part 12. Undercover Courage, the FBI. Task Force began operations with Emily Ruiz under protection and Grace as a civilian consultant. It was uncharted territory for Grace, no longer simply advocating. She was now in the middle of active investigations, sitting in briefings, reviewing footage, and helping agents understand how predators selected their victims. Her input proved invaluable. She could recognize patterns and warning signs that agents often overlooked. Grace insisted that every arrest be followed with immediate support services for the victims' counseling, legal aid, relocation if needed, but she wanted to do more. With Emily's help, Grace trained to go undercover only temporarily and under strict supervision. Her mission was to pose as a fence for stolen goods and bait members of Maddox's old ring into revealing their networks. It was dangerous, it was unprecedented, but it worked. Grace orchestrated a meeting in a Denver warehouse under surveillance. When the deal was about to go down, the FBI swooped in, arresting 3 men tied directly to violent robberies across state lines. One of them confessed on the spot. Another was linked to a cold case involving a missing woman. Grace's hands trembled afterward, but her resolve didn't. The work had just begun. Part 13. Whispers in the wire. With each successful raid, the scale of the criminal network became clearer. Grace had helped uncover something far larger than anticipated. Digital operations spanning across encrypted forums and black market apps. The FBI brought in cybercrime specialists. Grace, though not tech-savvy, provided context to what they were seeing. Her background in healthcare, law enforcement exposure from her father, and the trauma of her home invasion gave her a unique perspective. She could humanize the data. She could read between the lines of chat logs, recognizing grooming tactics, emotional coercion, and patterns of manipulation. One night, while reviewing transcripts, she spotted something chilling, a reference to a clean slate job in Aurora. That was her city. The timestamp was recent. The message wasn't just a plan, it was a threat to her. Or someone like her. The FBI ramped up surveillance. Grace was relocated temporarily. Her children stayed with her brother out of state. But she didn't hide. She returned to her office the next day. Part 15. The takedown months of undercover operations, intelligence gathering, and Grace's fearless involvement had brought the task force to a turning point. The final showdown loomed, a massive coordinated raid across 3 states to bring down the criminal network Grace and her allies had painstakingly uncovered. The FBI dubbed the operation Project Daylight. At precisely 4 a.m. and a Thursday morning, over 100 federal agents, SWAT teams, and cybercrime units mobilized in Denver, Kansas City, and Dallas. It was the largest simultaneous sting operation in the region in over a decade. Grace wasn't on the front lines, but her fingerprints were on every aspect. From identifying targets to shaping the psychological approach, she had become the moral compass of the operation. By 8 o'clock a.m., 36 suspects were in custody. Servers were seized. Victims were rescued, 3 of them minors, held against their will and hidden in suburban homes. Grace watched the news break in real time, tears in her eyes, relief in her chest. She had helped stop something monstrous. And it wasn't over yet. Part 16. A new dawn. Grace's story, now known nationwide, led to an influx of support. Philanthropists offered to fund Not Today as a nationwide nonprofit. A major streaming platform requested to turn her journey into a docuseries. Universities reached out, asking her to guest lecture on trauma-informed justice. But Grace remained grounded. She returned home, hugged her children, took a deep breath. She wasn't chasing fame, she was building a future. And this time, the world was watching. Grace Callahan, the single mother who defended her home, dismantled a criminal ring, and rewrote what survival looks like, wasn't done yet. She was just getting started.